Between 23 and 30,000 years ago in the Ice Age world, three people were born in different places, each having a new gene for light skin. In modern-day Iran, 29,000 years ago, the SLC gene, 24A5, originated in southwest China, OCA2, and some other genes were born about 25,000 years ago, and SLC, 45A2, originated in Eurasia, about 23,000 years ago. These three mutations affect 75% of the world's population today, which carries at least one of these genes to some degree, 50% having an intermediate tone, and 25% have very light to white skin. How did three people in history lead to one of the most successful evolutionary advantages that's sweeping across much of the Earth today? How did it take hold? What's its history? Why did it happen? What advantages did it bring? How fast did it spread? How does nutrition, UV, planetary cycles, and genes play a role? In the Ice Age world, most people probably lived in bands of 100 to 150, as according to the Dunbar social brain work that studied chimp brain size to social groups and scaled it to humans. One person carrying this gene in a band of 150 is less than 1%. Women were traded into and out of the group, further diluting the A allele responsible for light skin, putting the odds not in its favor. It could have taken a foothold by genetic drift or a founder effect, as seen later in history. Neolithic Anatolian farmers swept into the Near East, North Africa, and Europe about 8,000 years ago, bringing the SLC gene 24A5. All three genes popped up during some of the most extreme Ice Age cold snaps, allowing for vitamin D3 synthesis during a time of low UV to meet calcium needs. Without vitamin D, calcium cannot be processed even where plentiful. 95% of vitamin D comes from UV sources. Another commonly accepted explanation for the advance of light skin is that farming brought malnutrition, making it critical to supplement vitamin D with UV absorption by way of the skin. Both theories are benefits, but may not be the whole story. In this essay, we will break this down in ways that are not mainstream, putting together different aspects of the ancient world. The study from Beleza, 2013, timed SLC's rise as steady from 19,000 years ago until 11,000. Just as the Ice Age started receding, it then jumped. Wild's 2014 study estimated the selection in Europe over the past 5,000 years at 8 to 10% per generation, a huge selective sweep. The steppe people carried SLC 45A2 and started moving into Europe as a political power 5,000 years ago, introducing their language, culture, and their paternal lineage around all of Europe. Being the political elite may have associated status with skin color, so it may have been further selected for class status, or being exotic or considered preferable for sexual selection. Steppe ancestry accounts for 30 to 45% of North Europeans' ancestry and carried 45A2 at a frequency of about 30%. That means the first initial mix in Europe carried it at around 10 to 15%. In North Europe today, it's carried at a frequency of 95 to 99%, and 90% carry AA, which occurred in just 2,000 years, until 2000 BC in the north and 1000 BC in the south. They were already light-skinned, but this would have been what pulled them towards fair, more so than the 45A2 alone, because now the mixed group carried two of the stronger alleles for light skin, because the Anatolian farmers brought 24A5 a few thousand years prior. In South Europeans, their ancestry is 15 to 20%. That's roughly 6% frequency at the time of the initial mixing, but have an A allele frequency of 75 to 85% today. So we can see the growth of the A allele frequency in just the past few thousand years. Either one of the SLC alleles should have been adequate for deproduction, unless every little difference in tone is beneficial and ever more effective at synthesizing vitamin D. A fair-skinned individual in comparison to dark skin synthesizes vitamin D in 1/10 of the time or 10 times faster than dark skin. Olive tone versus brown skin is 5 times faster for synthesis, or needs 1/5 the time, and can synthesize vitamin D in cloudy, low light levels where dark skin cannot. This excess vitamin D can last months into the winter, where light skin is more efficient for synthesizing vitamin D from the sun. Dark skin dissipates UV from being absorbed by the skin while absorbing infrared heat from the sun. Light skin does the opposite by reflecting solar infrared, perhaps by up to 20%, and may allow for more water retention, losing less water to sweat by not absorbing as much infrared heat in comparison to dark skin. Could a slight benefit in water retention or overheating have played any part as an advantage? Nutrition. 10,000-year-old hunter-gatherers were found to carry SLC24A5 as well as Anatolians before they were farmers, so there was an evolutionary advantage before diet would have further promoted it. When we switched to a farmer diet, substituting in cereals from the small amount of organ meat or fish, which would have supplemented vitamin D, which is thought to be a reason for light skin to be necessary. The hunter-gatherers were already on the verge of calcium deficiency. The combined advantage for the Anatolian farmers were that they had an ample food supply that was storable, and they could supplement with their light skin for more calcium development. That could have been the reason the Anatolians propagated in such high numbers and had so many migrations, which allowed them to take over Europe, whereas the hunter-gatherers may have just been surviving as opposed to thriving. The hunter-gatherers had some signs of calcium deficiency, but the farmers had much more, especially in regions like the Fertile Crescent, and was a little less severe in places like Anatolia, where they had livestock and access to milk. The bones of the early farmers show smaller stature, dental issues, infection, and rickets. It was even worse later, where farming populations were packed into urban areas, where they were more indoors and clothed. Malnutrition may have been a trade-off for food stability and population growth. Some groups fished rivers and the Mediterranean coast as they went into Europe. It looks as though they took coastal routes by boat, populated islands, and penetrated inland by way of rivers. They also would have had livestock and milk as a calcium supplement, and so seem healthier in northwestern Europe as opposed to other farming populations. Calcium is apparently a very important nutrient that's very hard to come by in nature. Vitamin D deficiency can actually pull calcium from bones. It can stunt pelvic bone growth in females and stunt infant bone health and development. Both are crucial for population growth. So where UV zones were high, light skin supplemented for farming diets. And in North Europe, where nutrition was better, it supplemented for the low UV. In Africa, where UV levels are considered strong, even non-farming populations have calcium deficiencies. A 2019 analysis of 113 studies with over 19,000 participants over 21 African countries found that a large amount of the population had low vitamin D levels. 50% of children were vitamin D deficient, had low calcium, and a high rickets rate of 3.8%. Rates are higher in urban areas where daily life gets less sun. If a population can be vitamin D deficient under a tropical sun, maybe light skin evolved for the sun, not in spite of it. The Holocene, which was the hottest and most UV-intense time since the end of the Ice Age, is when all three alleles spread around the globe. The A allele frequencies even rose in North Africa and the Near East, where UV levels also rose, and it even made its way as far as Southeast Asia. In India, 24A5 was introduced around 5,000 years ago. A study encompassing Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka found that the region held an intermediate to high frequency of 24A5 and was under strong local positive selection and is becoming widespread. In some places in India, people carry the SLC24A5 gene in the frequencies of 90%, and many carry above 50%. They also carry some 45A2 from steppe ancestry. which makes up about 30% of the genome of the upper caste, but the frequency levels aren't yet measured. Almost all of the region carries SLC to some degree. The Sun, UV, and latitude. During the Holocene in Anatolia, where they had a population boom for thousands of years, and to the east, in the Zagros Mountains of Iran, where SLC 24A5 originated, had a UV index of 13 in summer, higher than today, and equal to subtropical places like South Egypt and North Sudan today. It probably evolved to take in the high UV of summer and store it throughout the winter. Today in Africa, up to South Egypt, all 12 months, have enough UV that with enough time in the sun, vitamin D should be easily absorbed. Between Egypt and North Italy, only 1 month has low enough UV that light skin is essential and a tan is protective. North of the Alps to around England, this flips where 11 months of the year has low UV. North of England, there's no months with adequate UV levels. A Swiss study of 20,000 women over the course of 20 years and their effects with the sun showed anti-cancerous effects, better cardiovascular health, vitamin D, and calcium levels. The Swedish women who avoided the sun had twice of all-cause mortality. The higher the sun exposure, the higher the life expectancy. There was no sign of early induced skin cancer. It looks like there is a skin cancer gene centralized around England and Norway. In England, the skin cancer rate is 33 per 100,000, and the UV levels are extremely low, and they don't have a sun culture. In Australia, largely an English population, has a skin cancer rate of 37 out of 100,000, which is a 12% increase of UV affecting a predisposed population. The white populations in Brazil and those around the Mediterranean who have a sun culture, or other light-skinned populations around the world, don't have the same cancer risk, so it may be a gene within a population that happens to be white rather than white skin being the cause of it. Blacks in Nigeria and South Africa have a skin cancer rate of 1%, which may be underreported. They have a higher youth rate and a shorter lifespan. The EU is at 4%, which includes the North's elevated numbers and an elderly population which is more susceptible to develop cancer. The Near East and Asia have lower rates than Africa. The rate of skin cancer in Europe is much higher in the low UV North than the sun-loving higher UV South. What is said to be UV risks between skin color doesn't seem to play out. Neural tube defects are under 3 per 100,000 in Brazil and the same in England. It's above 3 in Nigeria. If these figures are correct, then a dark-skinned population has no advantage over a light-skinned population that is getting high UV or very low UV. Another UV hazard is folate damage, though a proper diet looks to eliminate the risk, so the benefits of the sun seem to greatly outweigh any negative effects. All 3 light skin genes were in a positive trend before change of diet became a factor. It was on the rise during a time of high UV. It is possible that the 45A2 gene from Eurasia is associated with the skin cancer gene or is somehow more vulnerable to UV rays in some way. Northwest Europe also corresponds with a higher steppe ancestry, so it's harder to separate the fair skin gene with risk because it's entangled with the at-risk group. In general, I'm using light skin loosely. The ancient out-of-Africa groups would have been a light brown, similar to the Khoisans, people according to new studies. In Peretti's 2025 meta-study of Paleolithic DNA showed that the early out-of-Africa groups in Europe, going back 40,000 years, did not have sub-Saharan skin tones classified as dark black on the Harris-Plex scale. The dark alleles MFSD 12 common in black Africans today were not present in ancient samples. New studies like Jablonski's 2021 and Lukács' 2022 papers called The Evolution of Human Skin Pigmentation, along with other studies, show that the very dark tones found today in Africa are a newer mutation about 10 to 19,000 years old. Peretti's study of the Paleolithic Europeans and Eurasians had them classified as dark and intermediate, Dark on the Harris-Plex skin scale is from a light to mid-brown tone. Intermediate is olive to light brown by their classifications, similar to the Khoisan of Africa, who are the oldest lineage of modern man and the oldest survivors of the tropics, and likely were originally lighter than they are now because of their one-third Bantu ancestry, and that's while being unclothed under the tropical sun, showing that dark skin isn't necessary for tropical UV. Their melanin index is between 40 to 50. Pale white skin is about 20 Mi. Mediterranean people are in the low 30s. North African and Arabs sit at 35 to 45. Dark Africans sit at 60 to 80. The Tarim Basin mummies are related to a very ancient out-of-African population called Basal Eurasian and are often called the white mummies, or are at least very light-skinned and don't carry any SLC or other skin-lightening alleles, proving light skin already existed without the added whitening genes more commonly found today. Calcium is relatively scarce in the natural environment. Chances are, for the light skin genes to take root initially, it would have had to gain positive reinforcement from the beginning, meaning it must have been expressed. So if the first out of African groups were of a medium tone, it would have allowed it to be dramatically expressed and selected from the beginning, not lost into the population. There's dozens of other genes that also account for skin lightening that out of Africa groups have that sub-Saharan Africans also have, along with very darkening genes that out of Africa groups never had. Other dark out of Africa groups like Aborigines have darkening genes that developed independently, unrelated to Africa. This is partially how geneticists can theorize that ancient Africans were not as dark as Africans now, which would have allowed the lightening gene to show effect and have selective pressures. It did well under UV conditions as a benefit in general and seasonally, as it stored ample vitamin D from an abundant sun and stored it for winter when UV was low. It became crucial as a supplement due to a farming diet and expansion into lower UV regions. It may have been associated with status in some cases and may have been either culturally or independently selected sexually, perhaps even for dealing with heat itself. In the past 11,000 years, we've seen it rise exponentially and continue to rise even more so in just the past few thousand years, and expanding to over 75% of the global population to some degree, and across 2/3 of habitable land across the Earth. It's an evolutionary trait that benefits the majority of global expansion, being that the majority of land is away from the equator. Voigt's 2006 pigmentation study identifies SLC24A5 as one of the strongest signals of positive directional selection in the human genome. In Sturm and Duffy's 2012 study into human pigmentation said in talking about the SLC gene as one of the most visible examples of adaptive evolution in humans. In Mathiassen's 2015 study of 230 ancient Eurasian genomes, said it showed strong positive selection during the Holocene at an order of a few percent per generation, which points to a huge fitness advantage. Leave a comment on your thoughts, subscribe and like, and we'll see you on the next one.